Hello, and thank you for joining me today. I'm your host, Gilad Avrahami. I'm the Programs and Development Coordinator here at hmTv. And I am pleased, of course, to welcome my co-host, Dr. Bernie Furshpan, the Director of Marketing, Public Relations, and Media at hmTv. This podcast is a production of the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center of Nassau County. On today's episode of The Butterfly Effect on hmTv, please join us for a conversation about conformity. Now, in our last episode, we talked about critical mass and the fact that in order for something to happen, you often need a large enough group of people to agree on it, to participate in it together, in order for there to be maybe a political change to happen, or even for there to be enough attention paid to something for it to be relevant.
Just to augment that, and that is like when something goes viral. That's a critical mass. When something goes, in other words, several thousand can see it, and all of a sudden we have millions of people watching something. So that's when something clicks, something breaks.
Right, exactly. It takes sometimes a very long time for it to reach that point. Mm-hmm. And there's a tipping point, and then it becomes ubiquitous, or then it creates a sort of change. But what we didn't go into quite as much is what factors are causing people to join that critical mass. And I think that's what I would love to explore with you here today, because there's sort of a corollary to the critical mass theory, which is the bandwagon effect. The idea that people will join something, and the only reason they're joining it is because they see other people around them joining it. So whereas in critical mass, it could assume that people are joining because they've thought about the topic and they felt like that was the right thing to do and they made their decision, then they joined it. The bandwagon effect says, well, actually, often people are not making any of those decisions based on a reasoned consideration. It is purely based on what the people around them are doing. So where do you see that happen around you? How can we recognize the bandwagon effect in action?
First of all, I'm very excited to talk about this topic today. It really does expound on the critical mass idea. And it's like, at what point does it tip to become so omnipresent? This topic of discussion, or whatever it is that somebody is involved with. The bandwagon effect, many people call it something else, but that term, I think, would definitely explain what it is, and that's everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon because they want to be part of something special. But more importantly, it's all internal. A person may feel like they need to be recognized or appreciated or loved for being part of something. Like, I'm sure we've all done it. Somebody says, I saw Britney Spears last night. So did I. We're both fans.
It makes you feel good.
Makes you feel good, but it makes you feel closer to the person you're talking to. It makes you feel like I'm also, this and that. And so that you'll be more accepted, more recognized, more validated, more valued as a partner in this mission.
Definitely. Well, I think the bandwagon effect is a way of looking at it at a large scale, but really it's a collection of very small decisions.
It's a collection of individuals who also want attention, or not necessarily attention, but to be recognized and to be valued. I think every person on this planet wants to feel like they're doing something good in society, that they're valuable in society, that they're doing something for other people that's valuable.
Right. Well, I would say that, I've heard the term fear of missing out.
Right.
That's exactly what I feel whenever I'm joining onto something and I see other people are doing it too. I'm thinking, well, that sounds really fun. And maybe I would never, ever have made the decision to go and, do axe throwing at a bar. If I saw a bar on the street and there was no one else doing axe throwing, no way. But I see all my other friends are doing it and they're going to talk about it afterwards the next day. You know what? I'll try axe throwing. What the heck?
Let me cite an example here. So I'm walking down, I think it was 34th Street, maybe 32nd Street, and I'm starving and I'm hungry. So I see a restaurant. It looks like a good menu. I'm checking out the menu on the window. But there's another restaurant next door, and there's a long line going in. And I'm wondering what's so special about their menu, what's so special about their food. And so I asked somebody on the line, they said, oh my God, they make the best dumplings. So I had this fear of missing out. And the other restaurant, I could have easily been served within minutes. And I would have been satisfied within just 5-10 minutes. But here, I would probably have to wait maybe 45 minutes because it was a very long line. And I had the fear of missing out. And so I stood online like an imbecile. I finally get the dumplings, and I didn't find that they were anything special. Quite honestly, they weren't that great. I got to be honest with you. So I think a lot of people are, what's the word, kind of mesmerized in a way, maybe even hypnotized, because a lot of people like something, or there's a breaking point where there's so many people that are so excited that you actually believe that it's that good. And some people actually believe that it's that good. But I'm a realist, and it wasn't that terrific, quite honestly. But I was disappointed in myself for standing online. But then I said, you know what, if I didn't go online, then I would have always wondered what I was missing out on.
Sure. Well, I think that ability to step outside of it and say, what actually realistically was it like, is sort of an ability also to resist, the fear of missing out a little bit, and to say,
right,
yes, I have a fear of missing out, and yes, I want to look and see what other people out there are doing, but also I can step back a little and say, what is actually in it for me, or is this the right thing to do? Of course, there are much more important decisions than standing online for dumplings, and it really matters. And one of the discoveries that have been made, though, is that for so many people, that feeling of needing to be the same is actually a lot stronger than the desire, which is also very present for people, to be unique. You kind of want to be unique too. You don't want to look like you're doing the same thing as everyone else. But there was a study that showed, in our generation, my generation, Gen Z, as much as any other, there was a study that said that they really did follow, for example, buying luxury fashion brands, and that it was much, much more potent than the pull for them to have a fashion brand that was out of the ordinary or that was unique in some way. So as much as our culture values individuality, when it comes down to it for, big decisions or even very small decisions, it is conformity and not so much, wanting to be different that pulls us. There have been studies as well when polls come out, and this is where it starts to get also a little bit more serious, a little bit more interesting, that, if a poll comes out and shows that a majority of people support a given position, that just the effect of seeing the results of the poll makes it more likely for that minority group to support whatever the majority opinion is. So especially if it's not such a strongly held view, then that might be the tipping point for you to say, well, you know what, maybe they do have a point, just because they're seeing people around them say that they support that thing. So that's, and it has all kinds of implications. It has implications in stocks as well. Like people are seeing that everyone's buying up a certain thing, and the more that people buy, the more the people around them say, oh, that must be good. And of course, the stock market it rewards that if you're participating in something. It feeds
into it for sure.
Right. Because the more that other people around you are buying into it, the more valuable that stock is, the more likely. But of course, that can create a bubble. And if there's nothing underneath it, then that can all collapse as well. So
sometimes I find that there's a breaking point when let's say there's a buffet that opens up. Nobody necessarily wants to be the first one to get online because they look like they're the pig, right? So I'm going to wait until a couple of people get online, or even a dance floor, right? I'm not going to go dancing until I see a few people on the floor. And then when you feel comfortable enough, like, okay, because you don't want to miss out for sure, but you don't want to be the first one either. And that's what makes you stand out. Most people don't want to stand out. They actually, like you said, they don't want to be that unique. They want to be part of something that's exciting.
Right. Or if you're unique, maybe you're unique
within the context.
Within something else.
Exactly. Yeah, within the context of the overall, right? Like, we're all wearing red shoes, but I have white laces with the red shoes. So to make it a little bit special, a little bit more unique.
But not in a way that people will really question something about your character.
He's an outcast.
Yeah,
this
exactly.
guy's, what is he doing?
Luckily, we're not in a society where shoelaces are the difference between
right, exactly.
belonging and not belonging. But if they were, the sorts of things, even tiny symbols, can make such a difference in that way. But I want to go back to the idea of what fear of missing out does, whether in social situations or not in social situations. The fact that the pull of what of being wanting to be part of something, and certainly of not wanting to miss out on something, what it can cause us to do. And there are studies that have also shown that, the stronger your feel of missing out, your fear of missing out is, the more likely that you are, for example, to text while you're driving. There's also the classic examples of, because you don't want to miss out on what people are talking about, and it will cause your social fear almost, or your social anxiety to predominate over other considerations, including ethical considerations, including the question of how much you're paying attention to your own actions. And then, of course, there are the classic situations like if people around you are all passing around a certain drug and you're a teenager and you just don't want to be that person, then, you're more likely to also join in rather than to say, to make a stand or say, that's just something I don't want to do. And it has, I guess it sort of results in, if there aren't the right kinds of structures, especially in organizations that are making big decisions, or where moral actions are so key to the ability for the organization to work the right way, let's say a military. And there is a video that's shown often in militaries about, it's something called the bus to Abilene. So you can look it up, you can find this video online, the bus to Abilene. And if anyone in the military mentions it, you probably know just by the reference to it. Even in a conversation, someone says, "Careful," and or don't get on that bus to Abilene. And the idea is, in that video, there's a family that's sitting around. They're a little bit bored. Someone says, "I'm bored. You want to go to Abilene?" Or something. They don't particularly want to do it, but they just say it as a suggestion. You want to go to Abilene, and then the other person in the family says, "Yeah, sure, if you want to go, I'll go." And then the third person says, "Oh, if you guys are going, sure, I'll come too." And then everyone ends up going to Abilene. They have a terrible time because they don't enjoy the drive. They don't enjoy Abilene. They don't enjoy how hot it was outside. They didn't think about any of that stuff. They get back home, and then they realize, wait a minute, none of us wanted to go to Abilene.
Right.
But we did it because we just had this feeling that people around us wanted to do that.
Yeah.
And that was enough. So then in the military, you bring that up, and it's a reminder to yourself or to the people around you, let's make sure before we take a course of action, before we make a decision, that it's also undergirded by real factors, by real, reasons, and not just because it's something that someone mentioned at some point. So that ability to check yourself or to check other people around you in that regard is a way to safeguard against some of those dangers of either the fear of missing out or the bandwagon effect.
So true. Absolutely. You mentioned the word morality. I think that's important. A lot of people get involved in a group, and it's more important to them that they just are involved in the group, whether or not it's morally correct. And whatever it is that the group is doing is morally correct. And so we're trying to educate young people to be more critical thinkers, to be better critical thinkers about what they're joining, what they're signing up for, and what they're agreeing to share on social media. Because on a broader scale on social media, there are groups, but it's a virtual group. It's not a physical group, but it's a virtual group, and you feel like you're part of something. I don't know how we're going to mitigate all of this, but there's so much going on. It's hard to really put out all these little fires. There's a lot of little fires, but I'm concerned that it's going to impact young people in the way they're going to be when they grow up.
I'm very concerned about that. I think that we've increased our reliance on those sorts of shortcuts that I talked about, that we see a person around us who's said some very quick thing as a reference to why you should support this topic, or a slogan, something that hits close to the heart, something that has a lot of deep implications built into it. And we've taught our young people as well to automatically assume the moment that you hear something that it should mean this, right? So we use these symbols to shorten our discussions, to prevent ourselves from discussing things on the planes of facts, and instead relying much more on something very quick, something you see on social media, a single slogan, like I said. So, and it also turns out that the more that a certain action, a certain course of action, a certain mindset, even a certain emotion, the stronger that is, the more intensely, you will probably also stick to it and resist anything else.
Right.
So it has, I think, trimmed our capacity to discuss things and even to consider the other person on the other side of the conversation as worthwhile of participating in it. And it also means that, the more that we have that fear of missing out so built into us, and the more that we increase it as well, the more that we increase the idea that you gotta be in something. You don't even have to think about it. You just have to belong in something. We talked about slacktivism in the past. It's a very good way to quickly check whether someone is in on something or not in on something without interrogating more deeply what you're really supporting and how you're supporting it and why you're supporting it, right? So that is something that we need to encourage, of course. We need to create the spaces for people to have these discussions more at length, to understand the facts that underlie the issues that they're participating in or that they are being activists on behalf of, how important the stronger and more coherent set of reasons for participating in something, and the ability to hear a different side of it and to confront that side, not with a quick call out, but with something a little bit more substantive.
Gilad, you pointed out a certain term, groupthink, and I didn't realize it, but what I was talking about earlier is actually about groupthink, and it says that groupthink happens when the desire for harmony becomes stronger than the desire for truth. In groupthink, people stop challenging one another. They avoid conflict. They mistake silence for agreement. That's a scary thing.
Very.
It really is. That's what happened in Nazi Germany. It was like a groupthink. It was a critical mass, and then it was a groupthink. At first, people resisted this extreme ideology. It took Hitler 12 years to convince people of his ideology. 12 years. Today, I don't understand why it's faster, but I guess because of social media, electronically, it's much faster. Back then, even if people were talking and there was word of mouth about his ideology, people still resisted at first.
Absolutely. Well, I think now we're also more cued into things at a national or international scale immediately. You're part of an international community just by existing. Whereas at that time, if you lived in a village, you were disconnected. The most important things around you were actually the people who lived with you and not your national leaders and not the national party you belonged in. It was so much more local than it is now. And that, has good and bad things because there's a certain responsibility you can take on as a global citizen, of course. But it also means that, not that I think too many people quote Spider-Man in this regard, but with great power comes great responsibility. It's such a good quote. And the reason is because that the moment you take on that responsibility and you ask people to participate and to leverage the power that they genuinely have, the more that our technology allows us to be connected to each other, the more that they have then that responsibility to think for themselves and to make sure that when they're participating in something, they know what they're participating in. Now, unfortunately, even at that time, it shows us the ability for something like that to happen today. And again, like how easily people can follow something just because other people around them are doing it. And that's why we say never again, because we know the capacity for human nature to fall into that pitfall and to be so deeply influenced by things around us, and especially by hate, because hate is such a strong emotion. It really appeals to the heart in a way that makes your fear of missing out that much stronger.
So true, so true. For somebody your age, you have a tremendous amount of wisdom. I mean, I know people my age who don't have half the wisdom that you do. I don't know how you got this wisdom. I don't know how you got this insight. But I'm glad that I am your co-host. Not that we're co-hosts, but I'm your co-host, basically.
Oh, come on.
I mean, this is a brilliant idea, this butterfly effect.
Which was your idea, let's remind ourselves.
Okay, but you flew with it, literally.
I did.
Okay, and figuratively, but you did. And you really took this, this premise here and really just ran with it and broke it down to from so many different angles, and it makes so much sense. It really does explain for a lot of people. Most people just react to other people's reactions, right? People react to people's reactions. And nobody's really listening to anybody anymore. But what you do is you just, put on the red light and you say, just stop for a second. Let's catch our breaths. Let's break this thing down here. This is why this is happening. And it's just brilliant the way you delve into this topic and you broke it down into various aspects of why people do what they do. This is more like a psychology or sociology lesson, a master class, if anything. So this is brilliant, and I'm grateful that we're discussing these things because nobody else is, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Because people are just reacting to reactions. And so you're saying, well, this is why people behave a certain way. And it really makes sense. And it brings the humanity back into our adversities.
Very, very well said. Well, and thank you, Bernie. I would say that if I am coming into these podcasts with all of these ideas and these thoughts, it's because it's been all around me. You know, that is the thing that our education allows us to do, and I wanted to keep that.
Yes.
I think it's only too easy once you've passed school and you're in the working world and you're in the outside world, the real world, quote unquote, that you end up shifting very quickly to just focus on that thing that's right next to you. And that there is a lesson for the world and for humanity that we grow up with, and we have the privilege of growing up with here in the United States, because we teach every single student as they go through school to think about these things and to think deeply about their actions in the world and why they matter. And, you know, I wanted to keep that. It's something, as I've always thought ever since I learned it growing up, that was something I was going to keep with me for the rest of my life. So I think everyone has the capacity to do this, and I just encourage you to, you know, whoever's listening, to find ways in your life to do this, because it's as simple as making sure that in your conversation with someone about a difficult topic, that you're backing up and you're thinking about these things. You're thinking about whether you're engaging with it in a responsible way, in a way that advances understanding, in a way that respects other people, in a way that is good for humanity, or if it's something that is more just participating in a butterfly effect that you might not have any control of. And the thing that we always have to remind ourselves, and we remind every kid that comes to HMTC, is you do have control, so much more than you are maybe aware of. And that it's not going to end when you're in high school. It's not going to end when you're in college. It's not going to end with your family. It's not going to end with your essays. It is part of every single thing that you do. And you have the capacity, the intelligence, the heart, the soul to take action in even the smallest of ways. So I hope that this podcast inspires people to keep doing that, because, you know, even anyone needs reminders all the time that there are people around them who believe in the same things, and that if we all do it together, we really can make that difference.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well said. Well said.
Thank you. And thank you so much to everyone for tuning into this episode of The Butterfly Effect on hmTV. If you enjoyed exploring the information, history, and stories in today's conversations, be sure to check out our other podcasts here at hmTV. One more big thank you to my co-host, of course, Dr. Bernie Furshpan here at HMTC with me. Please subscribe, share, and stay connected for more engaging conversations. Until next time, take care and be well.